Hi and welcome to a weekly outlook. As I'm getting so many questions about it, I decided I would include cryptocurrencies in this week's update, and I may talk about them from time to time as we go forward through the year. Now, as this is the very first one I'm talking about it, a very brief introduction to cryptocurrencies, what they are. Now, what they are does actually vary somewhat from my own analysis. It's something I've kept well away from up until now, and may look at it in the near future, but more personally. But I did need to investigate, and I still want to do some more investigations into these opportunities potentially. Now, obviously, it's the word on the street is if you haven't got into a London cab yet and heard about cryptocurrencies, you soon will. Which always worries us when things get so broadly talked about, because by the time everyone's talking about it, then it's probably about the time to think about taking some profit. And I'm sure some people already have done that, as we'll see with, well, you can see from Bitcoin, which is just on the chart in front of us. Now, what are they? Briefly, they are effectively ways of paying each other, or some of them are effectively options of payment and maneuvering money, methods of moving money from one country to another a damn sight quicker than you would get if you're doing large money transfers. They've got all sorts of backgrounds to them. I'm just going to cover a couple here that I've researched so far. Bitcoin I won't go into massively, although I believe it's the first, but I'll talk about it as it's the biggest. It was the first. And funny enough, I think some years ago, I'm sure someone was trying to buy something off this in Bitcoin, which probably should have said, yeah, go on then. But I know they certainly wanted payment. I came across someone that wanted payment in Bitcoin. Well, you've got to remember with all these currencies, and sorry, I've written this very badly. What you've got to remember with these currencies, cryptocurrencies, the original idea behind them is very essential to keep in mind. And firstly, it was to transfer from X to Y money. As simple as that, in a form of payment. And the type of payment then was to be outside of the regulated currency systems. I say regulated, they're unregulated currency systems that we've got, but outside of the currency systems which are effectively fiat. In other words, they're not backed by anything solid, and you've got printing presses that can make as many of them as you want in terms of dollars. God knows how many dollars are circulating. So and nobody really knows by the time you get all the fake dollars and everything else. However, the principle behind the likes of Bitcoin is you've got a known amount. It's a bit like I can liken it to a company. It's got X amount of shares out there, and that's it. It's a defined level of shares, and the value of those shares go up and down depending on trading at the time. Now, what we got to bear in mind is these are going up relative to, and what they're shown as mostly is up and down relative to the dollar. Now, the dollar's having its own movements backwards and forwards, and has lost a lot of strength of late. So it too has fluctuation. So as soon as you compare like with like, it doesn't necessarily always work out brilliantly. But excuse me. Right, sorry, numbers going off there when I at least want them. Right, so you have got this comparison to the dollar, so that can create a bit of a false bit of data in some respects, because the value of what you've got it for to what you may get for it relative to if you're buying a service, for example. Okay, it may be related to dollars, and some people relate it back to dollars to do that, but they may just have a figure in Bitcoins that they want for a particular service, and you pay that or you don't pay it, or you transfer it across. So it can be as a purely standalone. I think the obvious thing is that a lot of people are matching it up to dollars and comparing it to dollars and say, well, I want to be paid in Bitcoin, and they'll pay it relative to the dollars, etc. at the time. But that was the basis behind it. So it was a currency that was not affected by any of the great powers. It was affected by people on the internet an internal basis. Of course, it then got caught onto, and before I go on to the other currencies, there was ways of moving money, laundering money effectively from one basis to another, and that's where the sort of the crime side of things caught onto play, and particularly with Bitcoin, I'm sure that early stages, once the opportunities were there, it came into play. Now, okay. Sorry, I'm just going to clear that for a moment. So we've got Bitcoin. The next biggest one I really want to talk about is Ethereum. Now, Ethereum is actually, this is more option based. It's running on a service, and Ethereum service is much different to Bitcoin. It's still blockchain, etc., but it's a different type of service that you're doing it. But they do have a coin called Ether, which is the means of spending money through it. So that is what is traded out there. Whereas I'm just looking at Bitcoin was sitting around about 1546. It's a bit lower at the moment, but it was trading around about 15,460. Ethereum is sitting there around 1162. And then so as I say, slightly different use. It's when you start looking at the backers behind some of these companies, Ethereum has possibilities, and is working, and it's using the blockchain, as they refer to it, as a service which Microsoft are actually, one of their partners is actually offering on their system. So when you see where they're backed up, there is, I think Ethereum may have a better pedigree long term on that basis than possibly Bitcoin. So there's pros and cons around these things, and the more, I haven't finished my studying of them yet, but as I study them more, I will be able to enlighten you what I find on these things. But at the moment, it looks like Ethereum might be a better option, or a good option effectively, relatively, because of its potential working with others. And then finally, the last one, so Ethereum, sorry, actually, let's just bring up the chart. There we go. It's the three I really wanted to, actually, I want to talk about a fourth one as well. So you've got Bitcoin, and Bitcoin Cash is like a split off. And this is the one thing that you'll see is it's a bit like I was talking about liking them to shares in a sense. So you've got X amount of shares in a company. Well, when that share price gets too high, they will be looking to make it more accessible to more people. And I think, in my understanding, is Bitcoin Cash effectively is that basis, is to still be able to move money around, but it's significantly lesser value. So it's like a sub company effectively splitting. But these things do cause problems, and can cause potential problems in terms of devaluing the master. Now, sorry, getting back to it. So Ethereum was the second largest, and it's got some great potential. I say potentially got potential. There's a thing from what I can see at the moment. And then there's Ripple. Now Ripple is, as you can see, $2.56. It's cheap, but again, when I started doing the analysis on Ripple is again, it's Ripple itself is known for a digital payment protocol more than its cryptocurrency, which is XRP apparently. Now Ripple, again, it's the idea is it's open source, peer-to-peer, decentralized platform which allows for seamless transfers of money. Yes, I was reading that because I can't remember all of this, whether it be in dollars, yen, Litecoin, or Bitcoin. So you can actually use Ripple as a basis for transferring other monies. So it's a slightly different use. And as I said, I personally need to analyze these a lot more. I'm sure I'll get people commenting on these now and telling me more what they found out about them, which I don't mind. And finally, there is one other here which I would possibly give a bit of warning about, is this Cardano, which I understand has become the criminal's favourite. Now, with all these currencies that I've mentioned so far, cryptocurrencies, there's the potential that there was initially with Bitcoin the potential that you could transfer illicit funds and very easily, but it was soon worked out because of the amount of detail that ran into these. It could actually be worked out who was transferring to whom, and when you started doing that, the police could actually start measuring by analysis, and the analysis, they could measure that if a certain place was making a lot of money and it was having a regular payment made at a regular time for some reason, they could go and knock on the door. So Bitcoin has lost favor in a sense from that point of view. However, that information isn't available through Cardano, and this is the one that's apparently the favored one by criminals at the moment. So there we go. I'm not going to go through into Litecoin and the others. There are plenty of others there, and this is one thing I should point out. I found on this list there's 100 others. There's 99 others apart from Bitcoin, which are all sitting there now, which effectively it's like another big, as I said about the company, spotting Bitcoin like a company, where it's just like another 99 companies sitting there, and they've got their own different versions of things as well, which makes life a little bit more complex, especially when you're trying to be analysing things, what's going on there. So, I'll bring that chart back up. Let me just bring that back up because I just wanted to make a point here. If you look at the charts on the right hand side here, these, what have I got these on? Price graph 7 days. This is over the last 7 days. If I was to click on any of these, it will give me more, a wider view of things. He says, there we go. And you can compare and look at things over a longer period. Now this has got all Ethereum on there, so actually it's got Bitcoin, US dollars, so it's been priced in everything here. What's the orange one then? The orange one is, that's Bitcoin. So you've got comparisons overlaying here, but you can see what that, I mean, the Bitcoin was a classic example. It dropped significantly. Ethereum was still continuing its path up, had a good move up last week. I believe it shot up a little bit more again. It's off a bit at the moment, but you'll see these things, they can move quite significantly. Okay, here's the problem. If you're thinking of investing into them as, sell a house or take a lot of money out of something and put it in there, because we could see this happen, because everywhere you'll read is there's the potential for a Bitcoin, for example, to go from $14,000 or $15,000 up to 25 to some people say $1 million. Now that could happen over time. Let's not get things wrong. Equally, though, what we've seen here is what we can see. This is the CME futures of Bitcoin. They were up at 20,000. They dropped nearly down to 12,000 at one stage. So if you're quite happy of seeing your money drop 50% within 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 days, fine. But how I'm looking at this, I think, I was asked the question last week by one of our clients in terms of cryptocurrencies. What do I think of them? I think there's possibly some money to be made. However, how would I look at them? I would look at them as an option, a US option, which that will with no expiry necessarily, although it may expire itself. But if you're buying it at X amount, you've got to be prepared to lose all of X. And if you're happy to lose all of X, go ahead. So X should be a small amount of your overall pocket if you're looking at doing this. So it's got to be, if you're happy, let's say you said, actually, I'm going to take a punt. I'm going to put 1,000 quid or $1,000, whatever it may be. I'm quite happy but I'll accept I'll lose that 1,000 if it all goes wrong. Fine. That's where this is that sort of bit like going into the bookies probably and placing the bet and thinking, well, if the horse comes in first, second or third, I may make some money. If it loses, it's all gone. And that's how you've got to accept it. So if you can do that and don't get carried away in all the excitement of these currencies at the moment, that's great. And that's how I look at it. And I think, if I eventually put some money in one of them, I'll probably tell you which one I'm putting some money in it. But the one I'm considering, I'll tell you now, is Ethereum or Ether. And I haven't done it yet. So it's no gain from me whether it moves up, down, or whatever else because of the information I'm giving you here. I have not done it yet. I'm considering doing it, but I still need some more information personally and how I'll do it, because you can manage all these through wallets, which is another conversation, and I'm already 15 minutes in on this subject. So there we are on my idea of these cryptocurrencies. Yes, there's a place. I can see there's banks getting involved with them. Obviously, there's a CME fund options, which these options are too big for most people. They're 90k options. So unless you've got a few, if you want to trade in that sort of size, fine. Sure, you can trade them through spread bettors with massive spreads. You can go and buy them yourself. As I said, there was Ripple, there's Ethereum, there's Bitcoin, which are probably the most respected, and I think there's Litecoin as well, which are again respected currency cryptocurrencies, if there is a respect. But there certainly is, from what my analysis at the moment, Ripple, Ethereum have got solid companies. Ether possibly with deals that may go through the sort of biggies like Microsoft and things like this. To me, I think, well, okay, there may be more behind them, but I haven't finished my analysis, so I'm not investing yet, but I may do, and it will be money I can afford to say goodbye to. And I don't expect massive gains straight away. If I do this, I'd just hold it, and I'd hold it for a while. I'm not looking to trade it in intraday trade it. I'll clear that one up as well for now. Right, let's have a look at these markets then, apart from Bitcoin, which is selling off in the current day. Right, let's go off and have a look at the euro dollar then. And now, one thing before I get onto the currencies, the technical analysis of these pairs. Thing to bear in mind, very little information out this week. It's a quite old week. I'm looking at only the most significant of data. Today we've got a Japanese bank holiday, if that makes not any difference to us at all. But then running through this afternoon, we've got the Bank of Canada releases its business outlooks survey, which is, I think it's 100 or 1,000, I can't remember. I think it's about 100 massive companies that are surveyed, and they're big companies. So it gives a good flavour with the contents of that and everything else that runs through there, and the Bank of Canada. It's useful. It's seen as quite a good report. That comes out at 3:30, so it could move the Canadian dollar. So that we have to then wait until Wednesday. We've got manufacturing and production data coming out from the UK at 9:30. Key figure always can create quite a bit of volatility. Later on in that day, US crude oil inventories. Yes, oils, if you're trading oil at the moment, they'll probably be quite key there, because we have been seeing a drop off in inventories, and that could push oil further. Then moving, and sorry, that will have knock-on effects for the Canadian dollar and of course oil. Moving on then, Thursday, looking at retail sales for Australia. The Australian dollar's been moving well lately. These could create some volatility there. Producer price index on Thursday, not such a big one in the US. But what is big on Friday, we've got inflation figures for the US. Now these have been crawling along at a snail's pace, and may continue to do so, and it's mixed with at the same time we get the core retail sales. So Friday at 1:30 could see some volatility kicking through. Right, okay, that's it for me. Let's get on and look at the technicals then. And the technicals, I'm going to come out to the weekly picture so we don't get too phased by what's going on. In fact, I'm going to flick onto a monthly picture every now and again, and I did want to look at this because the monthly picture of the euro is still bullish. Now I'm looking at the euro here and I'm thinking it's the opposite side in real terms to the dollar. It's the big. If you look at the dollar index, and the euro makes nearly 60% of that dollar. I think it's 58% when I last looked of the dollar index. And well, if you inverted it, this is what we're already seeing. Now the dollar index is inverted. I think the dollar's possibly still got some weakness to come through. They're talking about 2 interest rate increases and whatever else. This could have knock-on effects. Of course, Europe has its own problems. Technically, though, I'm just looking at technical analysis here. The euro, from a monthly basis, rather, still looks like it could be quite bullish. It's a little bit different on the weekly front, but it's put this indecisive bar in there into near-term prior highs, so it doesn't mean so it won't pull off, and it may still come through in the next couple of weeks here. But what I'm trying to get back down to is looking at the dailies, which is just sitting into its daily 8 at the moment. In fact, let me just come down to a daily chart. Key things to look at here: if it starts breaking this, well, we do have the monthly pivot below, which will always be a target along with those prior highs. So If it fails here and we do see a bit more of a rollover, this is potentially a buy point for me, because it's still in this upward trend, high lows, high highs in this trend that it's sitting in. And as I said, the dollar index itself looks weak. In fact, I'm just going to flick straight across to the dollar index chart so you can actually see dollar index. Let's get the right one. And you can see how weak this looks on the daily point of view, lower highs, low lows, and overall it looks pretty weak. Yes, it's having a bit of a run up, but all it's done, as I said, it's very much an inverted euro to a large extent, and it's run into the 8 there. Right, moving on then, the pound. Big picture first. Let's get out of these dailies and go into quickly monthly. Well, it's in a range, and it could well sit in that range. It's got the potential to pitch up for sure. It's probably held up a lot better than a lot thought. The big risk, of course, is Brexit negotiations, etc. But aside of that, the things are picking up. The exports are looking solid, even if everything else doesn't look so solid, and which has given a bit of a boost there and to the pound, and we can continue to do so. When we come through to the dailies, shorter term, well, again, it's range bound here at the moment, and there is a risk it could just remain pretty range bound and not quite follow the lead of where the euro's been pushing up, making higher and pushing up altogether last week. Here it looks a bit more sticky maybe, and it could just get into what we saw in December, where we just end up in a relatively modest range. Again, if it was to sell off towards the monthly pivot, it could provide, the same as the euro, could provide buying opportunities. Oops, sorry, gone far down too far on the yen. Let's just quickly, well, you can see what's happening here, and it's a huge consolidation from a monthly perspective on this dollar yen. At some point it's going to pop one way or the other. Now the original direction from this bigger move was to the upside, although it then sold off. And well, which way is it going to go? Good question. Shorter time, where it's not really giving us a lot more logic in this. It's consolidated. It's tight range between well, highs and lows. It's not really going too far on a weekly point of view. Coming down to the daily as well, it's pitched up a little bit here, and you can draw lines across the lows, the highs here, and it is just possibly coming back. At some point it's got the potential to run back off south towards its weekly pivot there. Weekly pivot, and maybe back even to the monthly pivot. So iffy, very tight. No obvious direction there as such. Well, there is. It's sideward. When I say that. Okay, so the Aussie, it's benefited from the commodities last month, particularly in terms of rise there, and it as I was showing this morning, it really does look like on the shorter daily picture, it looks like a gold. Looks like gold, effectively, almost pitch perfect. Now it's bounced off the monthly 34 there. It's certainly on a lot of these pictures, when you come to the weekly, where it put almost a pivot swing, not quite, but it pushed up. It's holding off here at the moment. It's stuck back. It got caught around its 200 weekly 200 last time. Did manage to break, but never held. Question is whether it will do it again this time. It's got monthly pivot below. It's got lots of, maybe a bit overstretched. There's signals on some analysis which will show some divergences on lower time frames. It's certainly, I mean, it's not too far away from its daily 8, so it may be pulling back towards that. It may roll over some more, but it's been extreming here on the RSI. Potential any support may just see it push back up towards that. It can sit in those extreme areas for some time, but as you see, it's done that. But it may get a bit more breather. But if we see dollar weakness, this is working well with the dollar weakness. Strong means a stronger Aussie dollar in terms of the commodities as well. So it's a double wham. So hence why it's gone straight up here, whereas others have been a little bit more slower to react. Okay, Canadian dollar. Let's just come into the bigger time frames first. I just run this into monthly. Remember, this is US dollar stroke Canadian dollar, so this is inverted effectively when we against what we're looking at elsewhere. And again, we've seen this sort of the pivot swing-ish pattern that was running through on the monthlies. This month we're already running south, breaking through, and no real surprises with the price of oil as it is. The Canadian economy is working better in some respects, and it certainly seems to be heating up. We'll see more of that, as I said, this afternoon at 3:30 when we see the report coming out. But over the last 3 weeks, 3 solid weeks there, pivot swing leading into last week's continuation down there. And looking now at the dailies, well, it's been a strong one this morning. It's to a degree. Friday was really strong. Its employment data came out well. It's got a weekly pivot above. We may just pitch back towards that. Sorry, weekly pivot above there, so it may pitch back towards that. It's got a bit extended from quite a few moving averages here. I'm sure on some time frames we may get a bit of divergence. Oh, nope. Just checking on, looking at different factors here. Not oversold. So there's a potential for this to roll, but if it does start bouncing, would be looking at possibly selling into the 8s and the 21s there. Okay, that's pretty much it for me from this rather extended weekly review or outlook. Have a great one. Bye for now.